Welcome back to Numinus Presents Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers. That's right, those big changes I've been teasing are finally here. For those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you know that this podcast has been brought to you by a company called Novamind. Well, several months ago, Novamind was acquired by Numinus. Numinus is a mental wellness company committed to tackling the global mental health crisis by delivering best-in-class psychedelic-assisted therapies, contributing to the body of primary and clinical psychedelic research, and fostering healing through community connection and social responsibility. I've been working with Numinus for several months now, and I've been so impressed by the heart-centered leadership of the executive and management teams and the tireless commitment at every level of the organization to helping people heal and grow. I am humbled and thankful that not only has Numinus decided to continue producing this podcast, they've committed to making it even better. And one of the many ways that they're making it better is by adding Dr. Joe Flanders to our team. Joe is a licensed psychologist, a psychedelic therapist, and the vice president of practitioner training at Numinus. Joe holds certifications as a mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy teacher and teacher trainer. Joe founded the Mindspace Clinic, which was also acquired by Numinus, and was the host of the Mindspace podcast, where he interviewed thought leaders, creatives, and peak performers about the science and practice of well-being. Reed and I are thrilled to have Joe join us on the podcast. He's going to be doing interviews, he'll be bantering with us, and as you'll see in today's episode, elevating the quality of the show with his expertise, his experience, and his authenticity and vulnerability. I'm so honored to have Joe as part of the show. I got to spend some awesome time with him up in Canada at a training team retreat, got to know him really, really well, and I think you folks are really going to love him. For any of you who are Mindspace podcast listeners coming over to our show to follow your beloved Joe over here, we welcome you. We hope that you enjoy our content. And without further ado, I bring you Dr. Joe Flanders. We want to welcome everybody to this very new and special episode of the Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers podcast, now presented by Numinus. So I'm Dr. Steve Thayer. I'm here with my intrepid co-host, Dr. Reed Robison, and the recent and wonderful addition to the show, Dr. Joe Flanders. How's it going, fellas?
How about you, Reed? Yeah, great. Glad to be here with both of you. Yeah,
that is exemplary of our what we would call our awkward intros. For a while there, we were doing our best to purposely be as awkward as possible. It happens naturally. We don't have to do it on purpose. But
that was awesome. But how are you, Joe?
Yeah, how are you doing, Joe? Tell us. How about this, Joe? Let's tell us where you are, who you are, and how you are.
All right. Well, I'll start with the how. I'm doing awesome. Actually really pumped to be here with you guys. Have listened to some of your stuff and have, met you. I guess I've met you, Steve, in person. I don't think I've met you, Reed, yet in person, but looking forward to that. Every conversation I've had with you has just been so stimulating and cool and fun and disarming. And yeah, I just feel very grateful to know you and to be getting to know you more and to be joining this amazing project. So that's the how. There was the who and the where.
Who and where, yeah.
All right. Thanks for the scaffolding there. So the who. So Joe Flanders is my name. I'm a psychologist. I specialize, I guess, in mindfulness-based approaches and increasingly these days, internal family systems therapy. And I've been, I guess, working in the field of psychedelics for, 4 or 5 years now, and just finding it to be an endless source of fascination and energy and something I'm just incredibly curious about. And I guess enjoy talking about as well with bright and insightful guys like you. And then the where, so I'm in Toronto. I'm normally based in Montreal. I work for Numinus and involved in the Montreal clinical team. I guess I'm also involved, the lead on practitioner training at Numinus, which is probably an important part of what I do and might be relevant in our conversations. But I'm currently in Toronto, and I was just telling you guys before we started recording that I was very excited about this interview and didn't bring my mic and the gear that I normally use for the podcast I used to do. And so I reached out to someone that I'd met from the Toronto psychedelics community, a great guy named Joe, and told him what I needed. And he just called up his buddy who works for FWI Media. And they just like brought me into this amazing studio, gave me a great mic, set me up. And I just wanted to give a shout out to them because they've set up. I hope it sounds good. I think it sounds good. So I'm grateful to them. They're in Toronto Liberty Village. FWI Media stands for Film with Integrity. So these are good people and they've been incredibly generous to me.
That's awesome. Great shout out. We're very grateful to them. So Joe, I think this is really interesting and weird and cool for all three of us because, Reed and I have been in the psychedelic space for a while, working for a company named Novamind. People who listen to the Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers podcast for a while, we've been doing this for a little over a year. Recognize the name Novamind. It's on. If you listen all the way to the end of the episodes, I'd say it's like Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers brought to you by Novamind. Well, Novamind was acquired by an even bigger Canadian fish called Numinus. And Numinus has been gracious enough to support us in continuing the production of this podcast. Not only have they been gracious, but they're excited about growing this podcast, growing the audience, growing its reach. And part of that was to bring you on. And you mentioned in passing that you also have had a podcast. Would you mind sort of filling in? Because I imagine some of the folks who are listening to this are fans of the Mindspace podcast.
I hope some of the Mindspace podcast listeners are joining. So I guess it's 2018, something like that. I started the Mindspace podcast. Really, really enjoyed it. It was basically, episodes about different aspects of well-being. Mindfulness featured quite a bit the last few years. Psychedelics started to feature quite a bit. I talked to a lot of therapists, Dharma teachers, mindfulness practitioners, got into some tangential stuff. I interviewed a professional comedian, into a musician, and it really sort of felt like a personal kind of pet project. I loved doing it and got to talk to really, really cool people. And it really was just about my curiosity about well-being and all the different ways people can cultivate it and best practices. And, I felt I was benefiting just as much, if not more, from the conversations as anybody else. And just really enjoyed sharing it and chatting with people in my community that were listening to it. And it was just super, super fun. And I guess I'll also say that I'm aware of the success that your podcast has had. And again, grateful to be thrown into the mix and really going to be really humble and go slow here to not disrupt something that's been working really, really well. And so I'll do my best you've sort of inherited me as potentially like kind of another host here. And I'm going to do my best to not, disrupt something that's working really well and hopefully add what I can with whatever skills I have.
And Joe, we've been coming at it from that same stance of like, oh wow, Joe's been doing this awesome podcast that we admire and follow, and I think it's so cool we get to join forces with you. So I think we've got this mutual admiration coming together, and we'll see what happens, what chemistry ensues. Looking forward to it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, this is going to be the listeners are going to kind of come with us on a journey because we have some cool ideas about what this podcast could be going forward. Joe's going to bring his prowess as an interviewer and his connections to cool people. So you're going to hear awesome interviews, and you're going to hear the three of us maybe reflect on some of those interviews. You'll hear conversations topically, kind of like Reed and I have been doing, that include some combination of the three of us, if not all three of us. So we're hoping that we can improve, not that it wasn't already perfect, but we're hoping that we can improve the quality of the shows that we produce for you folks and some diversity of thought. Because as much as I am an unbridled narcissist. I think it might be cool for people to listen to more than just myself and the good inner space doctor talk about stuff.
Reed, there seemed to be some kind of acknowledgement and agreement about Steve being a narcissist. Did I read that correctly? You just were like, yep.
Well, he likes to think he is. I'm nodding because like there Steve goes again, pretending to be a narcissist. If you know him in real life, he's not that. He's not as narcissistic as he likes to brag about.
Isn't it just incredibly narcissistic to pretend to be a narcissist?
Yeah, there's some layers there. It's Joe is a psychologist, so he's seen the layers for sure. If you peel all the onion layers, I'm sure you get down to a creamy center where I'm just really loving
Yeah, like a baguette, crunchy on the outside, soft in the middle. Something Joe said jumped out at me though. In addition to your peeling away the onion layers comment, Steve, is Joe said disarming. Your conversations, our conversations together have been disarming, and I'd say let's disarm each other and talk about our journeys to how we got here and what's alive in us about this work. What gets us up in the morning and brings us back again. Things like that.
Okay, Reed, you start. Drop your armaments and let us know what brings you to this work and why.
So I didn't mean I should start. But, why don't I just deflect that question with a fun quote from one of the McKenna brothers, Dennis. In fact, something he said kind of captures it pretty well of what lights me up these days. He said, if we can bring together the best of shamanism and the best of psychotherapy, I think we can offer a new paradigm for healing. What we're really trying to do here is revolutionize psychiatry. And I love that because that's the way I see it. This psychedelic renaissance is, in fact, a mental health revolution. And it's not only fun and exciting, but it's meaningful because it is truly disrupting treatment as usual in such a much needed way. And that's what brought me here. I may have come from an academic and research place, but I got my fire, in the jungle and in the personal little awakenings and eye-opening experiences along the way that fuel this crusade for me, for sure.
Yeah, a similar, I guess, path to where we're at right now. It occurs to me that because we're now producing this show on some Numinus channels, that there might be several, maybe even like 3 new listeners who don't know who myself and Reed are. So, I started my career as a psychologist in the United States Air Force. I was an Air Force psychologist for 4 years, and there were some great things about being an active duty member of the military and a mental health professional, but there were also some really challenging things. And I got kind of disillusioned pretty quick with the limitations on how much I could help people, especially people who were deeply traumatized. So when I got out of the military, I joined a small group practice and was doing a lot of therapy, a lot of reps, seeing a lot of people. And again, started to feel a bit discouraged, even a little burned out. And in 2017 or so, I started looking at the research and was noticing more excitement around psychedelics. And then, long story short, I eventually joined what was Cedar Psychiatry, founded by Reed and his partner. And we're doing ketamine-assisted therapy, and it just floored by the kinds of changes that I was seeing in people by combining, psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy, and a medicine experience. So I've decided to dedicate my career, at least this portion of it, to psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, to become a therapist who knows how to combine the wonderful things about psychotherapy with this non-ordinary state of consciousness, expanded state of awareness, and potential for insight that psychedelics provide. So one of the reasons we wanted to start the podcast over a year ago was we know that this is still relatively new. We're calling it the Psychedelic Renaissance. The name of the podcast is Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers. It's all still pretty new. And there's lots of people clamoring for good info and to know what it's like, to be a professional psychedelic assisted therapist. So, given that we're in the trenches, we thought we'd give people a sneak peek and then hopefully provide them with helpful information on the developments of psychedelics as therapeutic agents.
One thing I would add that I've appreciated about your podcast is there's the psychedelic community is very diverse. There's lots of different points of view, different perspectives. There's different cultural points of view on what's happening. There's the more like science, evidence-based drug discovery end. There's also the jungle end, and I don't know if these are on different dimensions or just this big mess. But I've always appreciated that you guys are serious about the evidence, like doing your best to be rigorous about the work, because it is, there are lots of risks and there's a lot of ways to misunderstand or go in the wrong direction with these substances. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's explicit in your values or in the marketing copy, but there's a commitment to rigor and doing things right, or as best we can, that I appreciate and respect, and actually is consistent with the values that I sort of operate professionally within what I brought to the Mindspace podcast as well.
Yeah, we certainly have that in common. This respect for, evidence-based practices, but as much or more for, spirituality and this love for the intersection of where these things meet, and this admission, like conviction that we don't have all the answers. We're going to do our best job, and a damn good job, if I do say so myself, at doing our homework and admitting what we don't know and giving the best possible information we can, as a form of advocacy and raising awareness and helping fuel this revolution in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess I can give a bit more about my background here, and it will probably speak to this issue again. So, it's sort of hard to explain, but it's probably tied to my own, small t trauma history or something. But I've just always been fascinated with finding new ways to be well and to be happy. And it, started as a bit of like an intellectual journey and reading and meditating and seeing therapists or whatever. And as I sort of got older, just started to appreciate how what a beautiful gift it is to take what I'm learning in terms of my own self-improvement and dedication to my own well-being and actually teach other people. And that's sort of the origin of my interest in being a therapist. And so I just find it to be an irresistible and super meaningful way to live and work, to cultivate my own well-being as best I can and use the wisdom that I'm developing from that and pay it forward to people that need help. And so part of that was just like going to grad school and learning how to do CBT, for example. I got really interested in meditation when I was in college and became a mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy teacher. And there again, it's explicit. You have to have your own meditation practice before you can teach, right? So it's sort of this, like, I don't know if it's layers in the onion, but like this dual channel kind of thing. And then of course the psychedelics, if you're curious about, all the possible ways, all the technologies, all the skills and tools to promote health and well-being and growth, it sort of hit my radar as like the tool par excellence possibly. And sort of threw myself in it again personally. And then, the opportunity to work with these substances is just an irresistible opportunity to be part of like a once in a lifetime paradigm shift in a major sort of institution in our society. and whatever. There's lots of it that's non-institutional, but addressing mental health with a new tool that has potential to really revolutionize how we live and how we deal with mental health is just like, I just feel so fortunate to be there. And it didn't take me very long, but getting into the field and doing this work really landed me in a place of humility and just respecting the sort of the mystery of what the hell we're getting ourselves into with these things. And, just really feeling a lot of energy for and curiosity, but like, okay, what do I need to learn? What do I need to train in to get better at this stuff? And it's actually broadened my scope quite a bit. Like, I'm now suddenly like curious about and reading about shamanism and how they do ayahuasca in Peru. And it's like, would have never had that on my radar. But a lot of the models we have in Western psychotherapy are not super adequate for dealing with the breadth and the depth of psychedelic experiences that clients have or people have. And so I just feel like I'm in a very curious and very humble place, and just can't wait to learn as much as I possibly can for myself and to help people better navigate their own journeys.
Yeah, learning and paying it forward has been a personal value of mine too. Because I like you, Joe, I've benefited so much from
Yes.
Teachers, from wise ones, from frankly from podcasts. One of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast, not only to whet my narcissistic appetite for people to hear my subtle dulcet tones, but was also because I've learned so much, right? Learned so much from people who've collected knowledge, who've gone through a lot and have chosen to pass it on. So, and like you, in spite of all that I've learned, I have so much left to learn. In fact, next week I'm going to Colorado to do the MAPS MDMA assisted psychotherapy training course, which I'm really excited about. Excited to learn from those experts and from the people who are going to be there. So that, like you said, we can pass on the healing.
I don't know if this is the direction you want to go, but I'll definitely be curious to hear what your experience is like in the MAPS training. And for now, if we want to kind of dive into this, what is your guys' experience with or expectations about MDMA as a treatment, and as it in the very near future entering our toolbox? So maybe just a general question: what do you all think about this opportunity coming up for us and for all the clients that might benefit from it?
I was asked that question yesterday. I was in this hot seat, asked about ketamine and its role in psychiatry, and really put on the spot to give an opinion on what role will MDMA play? What will the ramp up be like? How long until we actually give it? What kind of volumes? Because, when at Cedar Psychiatry, now Numinus, where we've got half a dozen clinics in Utah, when Spravato or S-ketamine came out, we made the decision to give it right away. This is March 2019. So within a few months, we were dosing it, but billing codes hadn't been figured out. It was a little bit of an unknown, but we believe in innovation and adopting all the evidence-based stuff we can. And we had the ketamine infrastructure, so it made sense. But, since then we've given thousands and thousands of doses, but that's not going to be, it won't be that same speed for MDMA with 6-hour dosing sessions, let's say, and an even more rigorous and regulated like therapy protocol surrounding it. But I also am a firm believer that it will take off and it will reach people sooner rather than later after approval, because MAPS is doing they're preparing for it in a good way. Like they did that cost effectiveness analysis published that was really strong. They're doing the training, like Steve's going out there next week. And, we do have this psychedelic infrastructure from both studies and clinical work, but, things like ketamine won't go away, but MDMA will play such an important role and be embraced enthusiastically by clients, clinicians, and I believe the payers as well. But what do you guys think?
What do you say, Steve?
Yeah, I think like I agree with Reed. I think the people at MAPS are doing their darndest to make sure that rollout happens, and that it happens in a way that increases accessibility to people who need it, that trains the therapists who need to give it. But I think, like a lot of new revolutionary treatments, we have no idea. We have no idea exactly what it's going to look like. Oh, well, we have some idea, but we don't have all the ideas. So my guess is that there's going to be some growing pains. That it's going to be tough. Like, so we've all on this call done psychedelic assisted therapy, either in a clinical trial or a special access program, and it is not like regular therapy. I did a psilocybin clinical trial, and sat with a person for 7 hours in a room that I didn't leave, and rode the roller coaster of emotions with them. And it was amazing and beautiful, incredible, the transformation. And I was freaking tired, man. Mm. I was exhausted after that. So finding a way to get therapists prepared to make it all make sense from a financial perspective, that it's affordable for the patients, paid for by insurance, hopefully, but also that if a therapist wants to make a career out of being a psychedelic assisted therapist, that they can make a good enough living. That's already hard enough to do for a lot of therapists. And I know we have a lot of therapists who listen to this podcast, and I know what it's like, folks. It can be really tough to pay your bills, even seeing a lot of clients. So there's still some problems we got to figure out, but it's worth it in my mind. MDMA, just from the data, it seems is, well, I don't want to overstate it, but it just seems really, really promising as a way to address trauma in particular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I could just, offer another point of view here quickly. I'm with you. I think I'm kind of more landing in the concerns around the growing pains piece. I was a co-therapist in a MAPS trial earlier this year and had a really interesting experience. Was very, very impressed by how powerful that medicine is, how it really opened the participant up. And it highlighted for me how much support is needed for someone who gets opened up like that. And where that support is going to come from is not obvious to me. I don't know where you guys are, but where I am, it's really hard to find a therapist. And, that isn't fully booked, and clinics on a, waiting lists and all this kind of stuff. And so, it's probably already happening in the underground, but if MDMA gets legalized and the number of people pursue the treatment as we anticipate, there's going to be a big need to support these people. And, we hope that there'll be, friends and family and people in the community to support them. But many of the people that need MDMA, one of the reasons they need it is because they don't have the support systems, because of what often comes with the lifestyles of people who have severe trauma. So, and then, you talked about how exhausting it is for a therapist to do that work. Are we going to have the energy, the emotional bandwidth to do that kind of work? And yeah, the economic stuff is, of course, another big question. But that's really where I'm landing, is like, how are we going to support all these people that are being ripped open by these medicines?
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of precedent to draw from with all the all the ketamine assisted therapy that's going on, and people doing that different ways. We have, the traditional approaches. We have the ceremonial approaches, the shamanistic approaches to draw from, that usually involve a lot of social support, a lot of community, right? I've been critical in the past of these ketamine clinics that just appear like ketamine factories, right? You come in, get your ketamine, good luck with life. A lot of people reach out to me who've gone to underground psychedelic ceremonies, or maybe they've gone down to Peru or Costa Rica and done ayahuasca, and they've been cracked open, like you said, Joe, and don't know what to do next, right? They need help. They need help. The word we often use is integrating. They need help figuring out where to go from here. So I think there are ways to do it, probably creative ways to do it, where you have people administering the medicine, doing the primary psychotherapy, and then you have integration support communities, integration support groups. You have maybe even coaches, people who aren't technically licensed therapists, but can be trained well in a shorter time than it would take to train a master's level social worker or licensed professional counselor or something, who can provide much needed support without going into, depth psychotherapy. So yeah, I think there might be some creative ways to approach it, but you are not wrong that these people are going to need a lot of support.
Do you guys think, I'm just curious, my sense is, while ketamine can go deep, my sense is it doesn't rip people open the same way something like MDMA does or psilocybin. I wonder, would you agree with that statement, or no, not necessarily?
It's hard to quantify. In my opinion, MDMA and ketamine are both unique in the psychedelic class in wrapping the experience in a safe, accessible container to do the work. But still, healing can be disruptive no matter what. The deeper you go, the more support you may need to integrate. And we've seen people cracked open with ketamine, but I would guess that if I were to rank them, a high dose psilocybin might have the potential to be the most earth-shattering, where MDMA coming next, you're going to do some deep healing and trauma work, but surrounded in that feeling of safety during, I think, adds to it. You still need the just as much therapy and support, I'd say, in general as psilocybin, but I think psilocybin might have more of a risk of unearthing those like whether it's dissociative or psychotic or manic things than the other ones by themselves.
And ketamine would be third on the list?
Yeah, just because it's given so often, like in anesthesia and conscious sedation settings, and such a well-known medicine. Like I've taken so many people into their first ketamine experience where they're terrified to go into an altered state. But then, like one client I remember in particular going into her first ketamine, and we were doing family work, so had like parents in another room doing like their own healing work as well at the same time, and this individual who had pretty significant OCD among other conditions. I wasn't sure if they were going to let me give the dose, but they went bravely in. And then within 5 minutes, they were like, this is amazing. I feel like I'm flying in space, and I feel like I can do flips and somersaults if I want and steer the direction of it. Mind you, there are varieties of the experience. For some people, it can be deep and difficult and really shake things up. But I think it does come with that calming quality by nature of its chemical class.
Yeah, I'd say for a lot of the ketamine clients that I've had, the most frequent experience reported to me is, that was an interesting thing. Like, it's usually not, oh my gosh, what just happened? Or screaming and scratching the upholstery off my chair. Like that's not the most common experience. Just sort of in the sample size that is my clientele.
So you've had clients rip the upholstery off your chair, Steve?
I've had them gouge.
Okay.
Yeah, every once in a while, right? Like Reed said, healing can be disruptive, and we do all the necessary preparation to help people enter into this non-ordinary state or expanded state of consciousness. And then you never know. You never know how somebody's going to react. We had somebody who was having a very positive experience, just very loudly. And so, hooping and hollering and yelling. And it was great. I was loving it. It was just very loud. Yeah, there's so much we don't know yet. But that's one of the things we're going to keep trying to do for our audience is to the extent that we're involved in the psychedelic medicine space, we're going to give you the sneak peek, and you'll be able to watch from our perspective this grow organically as we make our efforts to bring psychedelic medicine to people. So, Joe, I'd actually like to hear more from you and your experiences as a psychedelic assisted therapist. You mentioned the MAPS trial. You've had some other recent experiences that I think might be valuable for our audience. So, yeah, lay it on us.
Mm-hmm. I think the most recent experience I just had is still very fresh for me and still have a lot of energy for it. So I was very privileged to have an opportunity to work with a client who got access to psilocybin assisted psychotherapy through the special access program that Health Canada offers. For those that aren't aware, you mentioned it earlier, Steve, but for those that aren't aware, it's basically Health Canada's answer. So in the US, it's compassionate access, I believe. And in Canada, it's a program that gives people access to medications that have not been fully approved yet under very specific circumstances. And so it's not like thousands of people are doing psychedelics or doing psychedelic assisted therapy through this program. It's still, there's a lot of kind of red tape and bureaucratic processes to get through, but it's coming in as a trickle. And I was able to work with a client who I've been seeing for a while. And just such an interesting and beautiful and meaningful experience to be along for the ride with this person who's severely depressed. He's got a family and feels really badly about not being able to show up for them with the energy that he'd like. He does have a lot of difficulty in his childhood, a lot of trauma. And, as is often the case with what we technically call treatment-resistant depression, it's often someone who's depressed because of trauma. And that became pretty clear from working with him. And, he's really a warrior, this guy. He has been to hell and back, and he's seen a lot of bad shit in his life. And he just keeps going. He just keeps being open to new ways of working, new experiences. And yeah, he was courageous enough to go for this psilocybin assisted therapy, even though it's not even really an approved therapy yet, right? It's just a very, very courageous thing to do. And he just had a really, like, the best way to describe it is he had a very mind manifesting experience, which is to say he really visited the deepest emotions he knows. And, his challenges in life and the difficult experiences he had in the past and all the sadness around that was just like on full display through this journey. And actually, I've never seen this before. He lay there on the couch for 5+ hours. He did get up to go to the bathroom once, but he did not move. He lay there with the music and the ashes. He did not move. I couldn't believe it. I was like, is he sleeping? Is he having a huge experience? Is it mild? Is he just chilling out? Like, I had no clue. But, you sort of pick up on these subtle, energetic, cues, and watching his hands kind of like tense up a little bit, sort of got the impression maybe he's actually gone somewhere important. And it turns out that he did, obviously, as I mentioned. And, as somebody might in his circumstances, he's developed some coping strategies to kind of just get through the day, which includes like really shutting down, really, numbing out or dissociating from his emotions day to day. And, he really went for it. He had all these intense experiences and knew that was the right thing to do. And it just kind of cracked him open in a way. And now we're doing integration where he's just seen what he needs to process. And it's a lot, but he's shown up, and it's me. I'm working with a co-therapist who's really, really strong, really, really compassionate, and has a fierce commitment to transformation, which I really dig. And we're just doing it. We're processing stuff slowly, and he's, again, the sort of spiritual warrior in him is really showing up, and it's such a privilege to be with him on this ride. So Yeah, I hope that was a meaningful summary, but would love to hear your impressions, guys, of how that lands with
Yeah,
you.
man. It's a great example of the beauty that's possible with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and a great example of the challenges that are inherent in conducting psychedelic assisted sessions, right?
Yeah.
You're basically watching a guy sleep for 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
But with rapt attention.
Yes.
Like, you're energetically very present. You're paying attention to the subtleties. You're wondering, should I say something? Should I do something? It's a great example of, less is more. A lot of times as psychedelic therapists, depending on how we're trained as therapists, we want to set an agenda. We want to do interventions. We want to give ideas. We want to elicit interpretations or reactions or whatever. And a lot of times in a psychedelic assisted session, you're doing quote unquote nothing. Like, you're getting out of the way of the medicine, right?
Yeah.
But of course, you're not doing nothing. You're being there and holding safe space. You're facilitating the healing, getting out of the way of the medicine, of course, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a great sneak peek into what it actually could look like doing psychedelic assisted therapy sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it brings to mind what we were just talking about, and healing can be disruptive, and the other part of that is like you've got to feel it to heal it, or the only way out is through. And that's what another thing that really excites me about this renaissance is the fact that we're going after the underlying kind of root causes. We're going for healing. We're not going just for symptom management. Like, coming at this as a psychiatrist, I gotta admit, I went into clinical trials because at first in my career, because I quickly felt this frustration and almost desire to throw in the towel. I was like when PTSD showed up, and I was working with at a clinic in Salt Lake called Utah Health and Human Rights, a day a week, seeing torture victim refugees and human trafficking subjects. And like, I was so touched by their story, so shaken up, and felt so powerless with the tools we had that, I felt the urgency, to help find and bring into clinics and bring into the access of people who need it most, better healing modalities. And like, psilocybin is a good example of, you take psilocybin versus Prozac or an SSRI, and it's like, psilocybin, even though it's also working on serotonin receptors, has this enhanced like sensitivity and emotional release versus, an SSRI, even though they have been important and helpful for so many individuals. There is this reduced limbic responsiveness, or this emotional blunting that comes with it. And so it really is like this striking example of, you've got to feel it to heal it, or you're going through it. You're doing the work, like you said, about this brave warrior.
Rita, I love you. You've got these great phrases that really, these pithy statements that really capture a really complex idea. Like, you got to heal it to feel it. You got to feel it to heal it. And I want to riff on that for a second, because one of the things that has really been a learning edge for me is that the therapist has to feel it too. Right? That the therapist is bringing a kind of energetic sensitivity, and you sort of alluded to that too, Steve. And it's one of the things that's so exhausting, is that the therapist also has to be courageous and has to have their nervous system available to feel what's happening, and in a balanced way, not be hijacked by it, but in a balanced way, show up for the client with that understanding, and that the client is able to like feel held, and that they're in a trusting relationship and a trusting space. And I think it's been interesting how I've seen how important that is in the healing process, and also how exhausting it is. And I show up in these sessions, and I'm just so full of appreciation for my co-therapist and the client who's doing this, and I'm just so ready to help. And then just full of love and compassion. I just want to bring all that to the table. And by the end of the day, I'm just feeling exactly, well, not exactly, I'm feeling a lot of the heavy, depressed, down kind of energy that this person is sitting with a lot. And it's like, well, what the hell do you do with that at the end of the day? You're going to go back to your kids? Well, they don't want a totally depleted, out of it, distracted dad. They want their real dad. And so there's I'm just learning this whole piece around, how do you engage with the feeling it to help heal it, but then still have your own life and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's a tangent you want to go down, but it's been one of the big learnings actually in through this work.
Yeah, I think it's a relevant point for all professional helpers, I think, regardless of whether it's psychedelic assisted or not. The presence that you bring to the therapy room matters, and it involves some sensitivity and vulnerability on your part. I've certainly gone home from long days of therapy feeling the way you described, Joe. And you hear a lot in our industry, self-care, doing your own work is a phrase you'll hear. And those things are important, but it's not always immediately clear what they mean, right? What does it mean for a therapist to do their own work or to engage in self-care? And so, I guess we can speak to what we do, but I'll tell you, it's imperfect what I do to help sharpen the axe and make sure that I can be present for the other humans in my life that aren't paying me to be there for them, right? Like my wife and kids and friends, family members. But yeah, it's a real challenge.
Steve, you're headed out to this MAPS training, and I think you mentioned the facilitators of that, Bruce and Marcella. Marcella Adelora is the one who I've quoted often. I remember sitting at the last MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference. She's getting interviewed on stage by Tim Ferriss about how to become a psychedelic therapist. This is back in 2019. And she said, you can only take people as deep as you've gone yourself.
Yes. And thank you, Reed. Yes, please keep going.
Yeah. And so when I reflect on my psychedelic journey, and journey as a clinician doing psychiatry, meaning the meds and therapy, I'll admit, I haven't gotten as deep a therapy training right out of school as the both of you as PhDs, going as deep as degrees you can on the matter, but it's been a passion and focus from the get-go, but nothing has been as game-changing for the way I show up in the therapy room as doing my own work, and psychedelic work being an accelerated chapter of that, that has opened my heart, helped me stay calm, but also awakened my spirit in the room as well.
Reed, I'd love to hear you say more. I find that fascinating. You can, and again, you've got your way with words there. You can only go as far, the client can only go as far as you've gone. I forget exactly how you put it. Can you just explain what exactly that means? Like, I have an intuitive sense, but like, what the hell does that mean? Like, we're giving people medicine, it's supposed to be healing, it's supposed to help reduce their anxiety or like process some unresolved stuff. Like, what the hell does that have to do with how far you've gone?
Yeah, and it's a good question, because the important thing to explain, and in context, Marcella was talking about, if we're afraid of our own suffering, we can't hold each other's. We can't hold our clients fully. And that's one thing that I trace it back to my own experiences personally with ayahuasca right before being a co-therapist in an ayahuasca retreat setting, and how like there was really a life before and a life after when I found this new way of sitting with people with a wide open heart and feeling it, where I might have a tear dripping down my cheek, where I thought before, don't allow that, squash that, hold space. But I was missing some of the wide open heartedness that has gone such a long way and is so important in this journey through the feelings of psychedelic therapy, that and I feel like was missing and much needed in whatever way it could be brought into my early work with severe trauma, for example.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will hear phrases like that, like you can only take people as far as you've gone, and think, oh, in order to treat trauma, I have to have experienced intense trauma myself. In order to take somebody through a psychedelic assisted therapy session, I have to have experienced that psychedelic medicine myself. And I don't know that that it's the case that we have to have the exact type of experience that our clients
Right.
have had in order to help them navigate that experience. But like Reed said, I think it's important that we have learned to be brave in the face of our own distress, to open up and surrender during maybe a psychedelic medicine experience, like to know what those processes are like so that you can assist somebody in the process. The content doesn't have to be the same.
Yeah.
But to know what it's like to engage in that process, I think is really, really important. And to me, that's what it means, to be able to take somebody where you've gone. It doesn't have to be the place, but the way you walk there, to show them how to go there.
Yeah, the only way to not be afraid of someone else's suffering is to not be afraid of your own, and everyone's is different, right? And I think I take that and try and apply it to not just the medicines we use, where we try to facilitate experiential learning for clinicians in training wherever possible, and we work in this healthcare system, this Western medicine system, and the regulatory environment where we have to jump through some major hoops, and it's not always easy to do, and it's not always absolutely literally essential, but the work is what's important. Like I love to dish out therapy homework, but I make sure I've tried it on first, knowing that I'm a different individual than everyone else, but I want to have walked as best as I possibly can, a path that I'm asking others to do.
So I wonder if that gives you guys pause on the future of the industry. And maybe this is my kind of like anxious part again that came up when we were talking about MAPS or about MDMA. But man, like if the future of this industry relies on, relatively stable, intact nervous systems, people that have done their own work and, can be with suffering and distress and in an open-hearted way, like that's a pretty high bar for, for professionals in the space. And I don't know what proportion of us are up to it, are able to deliver on that.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, Joe, because I think relatively intact and stable nervous systems doesn't describe a lot of therapists I know. Unfortunately. But a lot of times what brings us to this work is our own pain. Like a lot of the things that attracted me to becoming a clinical psychologist was the fact that I was depressed and anxious as a kid, and I was interested in philosophy. Like, how does this mind work? What is the nature of truth? How do I learn anything? And I will say, after many, many years and many, many dollars spent on education and training, I feel like I'm in a better spot now, much more stable and healthy. And, a ton of therapy, by the way. Speaking of doing your own work, I've had like 7 therapists, folks. God bless the poor therapists that have had to deal with me. But I think a lot of people who are excited about the psychedelic medicine world are people who maybe have even experienced psychedelics themselves, or who have done some deep spiritual healing, or who are eager to do it themselves. So I'm hopeful that the gravitational pull that is the psychedelic renaissance is going to pull in the kind of people who can really contribute. And to do so, you don't have to be a fully self-actualized Ubermensch. At least I hope not, right?
It's interesting. I know that you guys have been involved, and I'm involved in training practitioners, right? And it's kind of an interesting challenge because we're going to teach people about protocols and teach people about the sort of biochemistry of the compounds and, different types of therapy and what kinds of experiences they're likely to encounter and all the stuff. But we can't really get into their kind of underwear drawer of their own mental health, right? That's kind of their department. And yet we have an interest to make sure that these people are that their underwear drawer is in order. You know what I mean? I wonder how you guys think about that.
MAPS is trying, as I'm going through the training, like the
Yeah.
asynchronous stuff online, there's a ton of stuff in there about self-awareness. There are
Yeah.
exercises they encourage you to go through, meditation exercises, embodied emotional processing exercises. Like, I think they're making an effort.
Yep.
I don't know that following an online course is going to get my underwear drawer in line, though. So I'm anxious to see what happens when I go out to Colorado, and I'll report back to the
Yeah,
podcast audience.
I'm just super curious about your underwear drawer now, Steve.
Oh, it's folded. It's color coordinated. It's arranged by date acquired. Yeah, I mean,
Over control.
Exactly.
no, it's wadded up and thrown in there. That's what it is.
And that brings up. I think your point is a really important one, Joe. And it brings up this idea that it's self-awareness that's the key. It's progress, not perfection. It's corrective experiences. Even if we're messing up as clinicians along the way, we're owning it. We're showing up with integrity and our imperfection. And the work is personally never done. Like, I'll never, be done working on myself. And, not that there even is any destination, but I think we can follow the example of some of the psychedelic drug development companies who are doing this really well. Like some of the upcoming studies we have that maybe we can't talk about by name yet, but just the process for selecting or approving and onboarding therapists is really intensive. Like, it's not just watch this 10-hour video and check a box. It's role play the hell out of these situations with while getting observed and receiving feedback and integrating that and showing that you can show up authentically, vulnerably. You can listen to feedback, receive it, and act on it. And I think, as clinicians overtraining, we've had to navigate that a lot in this early chapter, and we can learn a lot from others doing the same as we figure out the best way to show up for our clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate you inviting some authenticity and vulnerability on the podcast. It bodes well for things to come.
Yeah.
Speaking of training, I'd be interested to hear what Numinus has on the menu for training. How is Numinus contributing to the training space?
Yeah. Great question. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about it. So one of the first things we've done is we've created a course on psychedelic harm reduction and integration. Okay. And the idea there is people are using psychedelics already. Millions of people are. And as mental health professionals, we actually have an obligation to support people that are tinkering with their mental health using these compounds and help them if they show up in therapy, treat them non-judgmentally, help reduce the stigma, and integrate because they may have some important experiences to deal with. And yet we're navigating complex ethical territory and regulatory territory. And not everyone knows how to do that. And so this is like the entry level thing for people that are interested in getting into the psychedelic industry, but don't have opportunities to dose people. And so that's happening right now. And it's been really interesting to kind of engage with people who are just have a private practice and are suddenly having to field questions about the psilocybin trip I did with my buddies at the cottage kind of thing, and then I don't have some disturbance and am I ever going to get back to normal and all this kind of stuff. So that's one project. There's a new project actually starting pretty soon, a new course. It's a big kind of it's called Fundamentals of Psychedelic Assisted Therapy. And it's really like everything you need to know if you want to get into this field. It's like an 8-week thing. There's a few hours every week of like asynchronous learning on a beautifully designed platform, like online platform. There's 3-hour live sessions online where, we're sort of consolidating the learning and building community and supporting each other. So I'm really, really proud of that. And people have been working really, really hard. And I think we're going to deliver something very meaningful for people that are serious about getting into it. It's not like take this 3-hour workshop and get into the field. This is like, we're doing the deep dive and it's intensive. And then there's other stuff coming up as well, which it's also pretty cool. We're doing a case consultation group. So if you're working in this field and you want supervision or like connect with people, there's 2 highly experienced therapists in this field that are facilitating that. We're doing something that is probably the one thing I'm most passionate about, which is a course on what we're calling embodied inquiry. And it's basically where mindfulness and psychedelics meet for practitioners. How are you bringing your meditation practice to your own self-care? How you bring your meditation practice to how you're showing up during a medicine session, during integration, somatic work, and how do you use this method of inquiry, which my colleague Pat Rockman has really studied a lot and published on. Embodied inquiry. How do you approach these very complex experiences and guide people to meaning making? And so, this course on embodied inquiry is coming up. And then, there's going to be some material on like learning about psychedelic substances, and then a couple other things, and I'll stop. A course on the different indications or presentations that show up in psychedelic clinics: post-traumatic stress, depression and anxiety, addictive disorders. What do we know about these things and how psychedelics can help? And then, what was the last one I wanted to mention? I think that might be it. So, and, I'll just give a shout out to all the talented people that are working on this stuff. Devin Christie's a colleague that's contributed a lot of content, and Pat Rockman, I mentioned, is a great mindfulness teacher and now knowledgeable in the psychedelic field. Deanna Rogers and Cody Callan are teaching. You guys are actually going to be involved, Steve and Reed, in the fundamentals course, because that's a bit of like a, team faculty there for that program. So we're really, really excited. And what's really driving this is all the things we've talked about. Like, this is a very demanding and fascinating area to work in, and people need to be prepared at many levels. And, we hope to provide that to a lot of people, because we know that there are going to be a lot of clients that are going to need the support, and we want to make sure that we can meet the demand as these treatments come online.
Yeah, I'm really excited about these too, because it answers a lot of the questions that we often get, like how do we become a psychedelic therapist? Yep. What kind of therapy approaches pair well with these psychedelics? Which psychedelics to use for which indications? Which indications are treated well by psychedelic-assisted therapy? To the extent that we have the info, we're going to be disseminating that through these courses. So if I'm going to link to it in the show notes, but if people want to check out what Numinus has on offer, you can go to numinus.com. Numinus is spelled Numinus.com. And just click on services and practitioner training, and you'll see it.
I'd mention one other, and we'll see if Comms asks us to edit this out, but we are working on experiential training, and we can do a whole deep dive on this, but we are working on experiential training with ketamine, experiential training with psilocybin, and experiential training with MDMA, which I think is unique. There are not many places, not many training institutes or programs where you can actually under supervision and fully above board, take a psychedelic substance and learn from that end. But, very important, necessary, extremely useful to know what your clients are going to be going through. What do you guys think of that? And feel if we're running out of time, we can pick this up some other time.
I kind of touched on this already, so I'll defer to Steve, but I fall in the camp of, extremely helpful, necessary to have some kind of non-ordinary state experience, but I realize it's not practical to experience every medicine enough times to really get to
Yeah.
know it in order to work with these things in a time of mental health crisis and urgency in the people we help.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really, really helpful to have an altered state experience if you're going to be a psychedelic assisted therapist. And again, altered state could be. I went to a breathwork seminar or whatever you call it, a breathwork thing earlier this week, and I had a fully psychedelic experience doing holotropic breathwork.
Yeah.
They hit this gong. Let me just talk about this real quick. This person had this gong that was like 10 feet by 10 feet. It was the biggest gong I've ever seen in my entire life. It was the entire west wall of this little kiva. And we're all 30 people in there doing our breath work, and pretty well into it, maybe 40 minutes into it. And, I'm weeping, and then I'm screaming, and then I'm laughing, and I'm getting tetany, and I'm getting the lobster claws. And she starts playing the gong, and she says, "All right, on the count of 3, everyone yell as loud as you can." And 1, 2, 3, and she smacks that gong. And I yelled, I think, because I dissolved and became one with the universe. So I don't know exactly what came out of my mouth. It might have been, locusts or energy or whatever, but it was a fully altered state experience. So yeah, folks, you don't have to take a drug. There's plenty inside you already.
Wow.
How's that to end on?
I'm definitely not going to try to top that. Yeah, no, I'm done. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
I'm glad your lobster claws resolved.
Yeah, that's never happened to me with breathwork before. But like forearms tightened up, and it happens. It's nothing to be nothing to be too alarmed by. I knew it was possible, but yeah, Joe, just so thankful that you're part of the Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers team, and looking forward to the cool content that we're going to produce together, the awesome interviews. As I said before, giving people kind of that sneak peek into what it's like to become a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. Any last thoughts from either of you before we sign off?
I'll just echo a big thank you and welcome to Joe. So excited to be tag teaming this next chapter with you and Steve.
Right on. Receiving all that and sending it right back. Super grateful. Really enjoyed this conversation. Looking forward to more.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Numinus, a mental wellness company committed to tackling the global mental health crisis by delivering best-in-class psychedelic-assisted therapies, contributing to the body of primary and clinical psychedelic research, and fostering healing through community connection and social responsibility. You can learn more about Numinus at numinus.com. That's Numinus.com. If you enjoyed the show today and you want to support us, here's how you do it. Rate and review the show on platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Subscribe to the Numinus YouTube channel, like the videos, and share it. Share the show or clips of the show with someone that you think will enjoy it. The content of this podcast does not constitute medical advice or mental health treatment. Consult with a medical or mental health professional if you believe you are in need of mental health treatment.